Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Experience Lounge podcast. You're joining me again for another Employee Experience Bite, which is a shorter episode dedicated to a variety of different employee experience topics. And this week, I'm going to be talking about how to extract employee insights in under an hour. So I'll really be focusing on how can you facilitate a really effective focus group so that you walk away with the insights you need to drive your change or inspire an employee experience transformation program, whatever it might be. Okay, so how to make the most of 60 minutes with your people to capture as much feedback as possible. So, the first thing I want to address, point number one, is scope. So, in order for this to be an effective 60-minute period, you need to make sure that you have scoped your focus group appropriately. So, going in with a big, broad question around what are your employee experience challenges is going to really create a struggle for you. So it'll be really hard to analyze the insights you get, and it will probably confuse your stakeholders, if I'm totally honest. They'll be a bit confused about how the session's going to run. They're going to be unclear about what the purpose of the call is. So if you can be really clear on the scope, you'll get much better insights and you'll make sure your stakeholders are also clear and not confused. So a couple of examples in terms of scope for 60 minutes that I would recommend. First is challenges with the onboarding experience. That's always a very popular one. Challenges when coming back from paternity leave or maternity leave, whatever it might be, challenges with offboarding or challenges with the performance review process. Okay, so really thinking about specific experiences that you want to capture feedback on, and that will mean you are scoping effectively. The second, kind of connected to that, is inviting the right stakeholders. So if you are, for example, going to be running a focus group on the onboarding experience, you don't want to be inviting people that joined the organization 10 years ago and aren't line managers. They haven't had any exposure to onboarding since. So really thinking about, do we extract a list of people that joined the organization within the last 6 months and capture their feedback to make sure they're invited? Likewise, if you're thinking about performance review, making sure that you've got kind of representation from those who had a positive outcome, so those people that were promoted and those people who weren't promoted as well. So thinking about how recent was the experience for people, but also what's the spectrum of opinion we want to capture here. So having that kind of positive more and negative angle potentially of an experience will really mean that your feedback is well rounded, and you'll get to see a clear picture. So that's the second point. So inviting the right stakeholders. Third is using a tool like silent ideation. So I did not create silent ideation. This is not necessarily a new concept, but silent ideation really allows you to capture loads of feedback without being dominated by one or two powerful voices in a room. So let me give you an example. If I were to do a verbal focus group and I invited 25 people along, the odds are there'll be 4 or 5 people that will dominate the conversation. And those will be people that have a lot to say, they'll talk a lot, they'll want to share their opinions. And then you have a huge amount of people in the room who either don't get an opportunity to share or they feel under pressure to share certain views only that align with the more dominant voices. It's just a real nightmare, both from a participant's perspective, but also from a facilitation perspective, because analyzing verbal insights is also really difficult. And so using something like silent ideation means that you're giving everybody a voice in the room. So let me give you an example of how this will work. If I were to do a virtual focus group in Mural, I would use sticky notes and I would say to everybody, okay, here's a question. What did you like about the onboarding experience? I'd then put a timer on and I'd say, okay, you've got 5 minutes to fill out as many sticky notes as possible and put them under the question. And we'll work in silence as we do it. Put some music on in the background so it's not awkward, but you're giving everybody the same 5 minutes to share as many of their own perspectives as possible. If you gave that same 5 minutes to verbal sharing, you'd probably get 1 or 2 voices if you're lucky. So you're definitely capturing way more insights in terms of volume, and people feel like they have the opportunity to share. They're not being overwhelmed. If you were doing it in person, same thing applies. You just say to people, grab actual sticky notes and go and stick them up on the wall underneath the question. 5 minutes, put some music on in the background, and then you kind of see this huge array of sticky notes and insights. And I promise you, you'll get a lot more out of that than you would just posing a verbal question and inviting people to come off mute or to share verbally. So silent ideation, absolutely would recommend that. And I think it's a really effective way if you're short for time or you only have 60 minutes to capture that volume of insights you need to really see what are the challenges we want to solve? So with that in mind, I've kind of already jumped into this, but what are the questions you want to ask? So if I were given 60 minutes to uncover the root cause of, I don't know, onboarding disengagement or performance review feedback being negative, here's how I would structure it. So the first is what works well. So asking people for the good. So asking people what worked well with this experience. What did you enjoy? And I find that this is a really nice reflective question because people have to think about that entire experience. They have to go back and think, what did I like about the experience? And actually, what was the experience I went through? So it's a really nice kind of introductory question because it gets people to reflect on that end-to-end experience, picking out the good things. So start with that. So what is the good? Then you want to move on to your challenges. So what didn't work so well with this experience? And the one piece of advice I always give with this is rather than it being a kind of free for all, throw all your questions against, sorry, not your questions, your challenges against the wall under this broad, what were your challenges question, is ask people to prioritize those challenges. So have buckets of major issues, moderate, and minor. And this is a really effective way of getting people to think about their challenges and kind of where would they put them, but also to help you prioritize. So if after that hour-long session you want to see, okay, well, what are the big issues that we need to tackle first? You're capturing that perspective as well. So asking for the challenges, but getting people to organize their thoughts a little bit in terms of severity of those issues. Similar, and the third question I would ask is what would you change? So following the same structure in terms of getting people to prioritize those changes, asking people if you had a magic wand, what would you change about this experience? So what would you change about the onboarding or the performance review experience to make it better for you? And so I really like this question because it gets people to think about how they would solve for the challenges. But it also means that your stakeholders that you've invited feel involved in the solution design. So it's a really nice kind of change activity as well to really capture that feedback and to involve people in the design early on. So that is the kind of third and final question that I would pose within that 60 minutes. So starting with the good, a nice bit of reflection, then onto the challenges, and that will be where most of your time will be spent, and then into opportunities. So what would you change? And I think that's a really nice kind of three-pillared structure that will allow you to capture plenty of insights. Now, you might not get everything you need. You might have to deep dive. You might see particular challenges coming out that you want to maybe do another focus group to explore further. But I think following that three-pronged approach will really mean that you've got quite a nice holistic starting point anyway for your employee experience challenge. The last thing that I would say, and I know I've spoken a bit about verbal insight sharing, but I would always factor into an hour-long workshop 5-10 minutes towards the end to invite people to share verbally. And the reason for this is a lot of people like to share verbally. And so you want to make sure you're giving your participants the space they need to get things off their chest. Now, the likelihood is they won't surface anything different to what you've already captured on the mural, but you may be surprised. But it is just good to afford people that time to take themselves off mute. You know, they've gone through your process, they've sat working in silence for the last 50 odd minutes, you know, really give them some time to take themselves off mute, or if you're in person, to share what they're thinking. So I think it's a really healthy thing to do. And again, you never know, you might find there's an interesting build in that last segment, in that verbal sharing. So you don't want to miss out on that either. So that was it. Very quick. Hopefully I'm not too out of breath for you being heavily pregnant. But I really hope that that was a useful kind of structure. If you're short for time, you've only got an hour, you want to really try and get to the bottom of a challenge, I can promise you that structure really works well. Using silent ideation, really, really effective tool, and also ensures that you're getting that diversity of perspective as well. So you're not just being overwhelmed by those 2 or 3 loud voices in the room. So let me know how you get on if you're running an hour-long workshop to try and understand your employees' insights and perspectives. Let me know how you do. And if I can be of any help or you want some additional advice, please just reach out and let us know how you get on. We'll see you in the next episode.